Manipulative people are often loud, forceful, and confident. They thrive on control, emotional pressure, and confusion. Most expect that to defeat them, you have to be equally aggressive. But that's not how the INFJ works. The INFJ fights a different kind of battle, a quiet one. They don't shout, they don't play obvious games, and they rarely show their strategy. Yet somehow, manipulators find themselves losing ground without even realizing it. This is the quiet strength of the INFJ. It comes from a combination of deep intuition, emotional intelligence, and a commitment to truth. They can see through the surface charm and crafted stories that manipulators use. More importantly, they don't just react. They plan their response carefully, often staying calm, while the manipulator becomes frustrated or confused. The power of the INFJ in these situations is subtle. They know that direct confrontation often fuels a manipulator's tactics, so instead, they move strategically. They understand people's emotions and motives, and they can use that understanding to dismantle manipulative behavior without escalating the situation. It's not about revenge, it's about reclaiming control and protecting themselves and others. In this video, we're going to explore 6 specific tactics that INFJs use to quietly destroy manipulative people. These tactics aren't about attacking, they're about outthinking. They work because they come from a place of awareness, patience, and self-respect. And when applied over time, they can completely shift the balance of power away from the manipulator. Let's start with the first tactic, which begins before the manipulator even realizes the INFJ is onto them. Tactic number 1. Reading the emotional pulse with intuition. An INFJ's first line of defense against manipulation is their intuition. This isn't a vague feeling, it's a refined skill built on years of paying attention to subtle details. They notice changes in tone, small inconsistencies in a story, or patterns in someone's behavior that others overlook. Manipulators often rely on people missing these small signs. They count on being able to twist facts or shift blame without being questioned. But with an INFJ, that's much harder. Even before the manipulator's tactics become obvious, the INFJ is picking up signals that something is off. This reading of the emotional pulse means the INFJ can sense hidden motives early. If someone's words don't match their energy, or if they seem overly invested in influencing a decision, the INFJ takes note. They don't always act immediately. Part of their strategy is to observe and gather more information before responding. The advantage of this early detection is that the INFJ rarely gets blindsided. While others may only realize they're being manipulated after a situation has escalated, the INFJ often sees it coming. This gives them time to mentally prepare and adjust their behavior to avoid being pulled into the manipulator's game. When they sense manipulation, INFJs also begin to subtly test their instincts. They might ask careful questions, change the subject, or present a small piece of unexpected information to see how the other person reacts. The manipulator's response often confirms what the INFJ already suspected. By the time most people have caught on, the INFJ has already mapped out the manipulator's likely patterns. This makes it far easier for them to counter moves before they happen. The beauty of this tactic is its invisibility. The manipulator often doesn't know they've been detected until it's too late. And because the INFJ hasn't made any obvious moves, they keep the upper hand without appearing confrontational. Tactic number 2, withholding vulnerability. Once an INFJ suspects manipulation, one of the first things they do is protect their emotional access points. Manipulators thrive on information, especially personal, emotional details they can use for leverage. INFJs know this, so they start limiting what they share. This withholding isn't about becoming cold or distant without reason. It's about selective openness. The INFJ may still engage in conversation, but they avoid revealing thoughts or feelings that could be twisted. They might answer questions with general statements, redirect topics, or share only surface-level details. This tactic works because it starves the manipulator of fuel. Without access to the INFJ's vulnerabilities, it becomes much harder to influence or guilt them. The manipulator may try to push for more, but the INFJ's calm deflection makes it clear that door is closed. It also creates an interesting shift in the power dynamic. Manipulators are often used to being in control, but when their emotional hooks don't work, they become frustrated. This frustration can lead them to reveal more of their own intentions, giving the INFJ even more insight into their tactics. The INFJ's strength here comes from patience. They don't rush to expose the manipulator. Instead, they maintain polite, steady boundaries while keeping their own emotions guarded. Over time, the manipulator may feel like they're losing their grip, because they are. This approach also protects the INFJ from emotional exhaustion. Engaging deeply with the manipulator can be draining, and by limiting emotional exposure, they conserve their energy. That makes them far more effective in the long run, because they can think clearly and respond strategically. By withholding vulnerability, INFJs take away one of the manipulator's greatest weapons. And they do it so quietly that the manipulator often doesn't realize what's happening until their influence has already weakened. Tactic number 3, reflecting back emotions calmly. When dealing with manipulators, INFJs know that reacting with anger or defensiveness often plays right into the other person's hands. Manipulators thrive on emotional chaos because it distracts from their tactics and gives them more opportunities to twist the situation. That's why INFJs choose a calmer approach, reflecting the manipulator's emotions back to them without adding fuel to the fire. This tactic begins with careful listening. The INFJ will let the manipulator speak, not because they believe them, but because they are gathering information. They pay attention to word choice, tone, and body language, all while keeping their own responses measured. When they do respond, they often rephrase what the manipulator has said, but in neutral terms. For example, if the manipulator says, "You clearly don't care about this," the INFJ might reply, "It sounds like you're feeling that I'm not invested." This subtle shift forces the manipulator to own their feelings instead of framing them as facts. Reflecting emotions back in this way accomplishes two things. First, it removes the manipulator's ability to escalate the conversation through emotional baiting. Second, it exposes the manipulator's tactics without direct accusation. This makes it harder for them to play the victim or claim they're being attacked. The calm tone is key here. INFJs understand that even correct points lose impact if delivered aggressively. By staying composed, they maintain control of the interaction and prevent the manipulator from setting the emotional tone. Over time, this reflective approach can cause manipulators to back down. Without the emotional reactions they want, they may decide the INFJ isn't an easy target. And because the INFJ never loses composure, the manipulator has little to use against them later. This tactic is powerful because it's both defensive and revealing. It shields the INFJ from emotional harm while quietly showing the manipulator that their usual tricks won't work. Tactic number 4, strategic boundaries and silence. INFJs are natural listeners, but they also know when listening becomes a risk. Manipulators often use conversation as a way to wear down defenses, introduce guilt, or create confusion. That's why one of the most effective INFJ tactics is using strategic boundaries and sometimes complete silence to regain control. Setting these boundaries can take many forms. It might mean ending a conversation when it starts to feel manipulative, refusing to answer certain questions, or declining invitations to situations where manipulation is likely to occur. The key is that the INFJ sets these limits without unnecessary explanation. Silence is a particularly strong tool here. Manipulators often expect people to fill awkward pauses with justifications or concessions. When an INFJ remains silent instead, it shifts the pressure back onto the manipulator. Suddenly, they're the ones scrambling to fill the space, which can lead them to reveal more than they intended. This approach also sends a clear but subtle message. The INFJ is not available for emotional games. By removing their attention, they take away the manipulator's stage. And because they do it without hostility, it's difficult for the manipulator to accuse them of overreacting. Strategic boundaries require confidence, and INFJs often build this confidence through experience. The more they see how well it works, the easier it becomes to say no or simply not engage. They understand that they are not obligated to participate in every conversation or interaction, especially if it compromises their well-being. By combining clear boundaries with well-timed silence, INFJs create a space where manipulation can't thrive. And they do it so naturally that others might not even realize a defensive move has taken place. Tactic number 5, gentle truth disclosure. INFJs know that calling out a manipulator directly can backfire. If the manipulator feels cornered, they may double down, deflect, or turn others against the INFJ. That's why another tactic they use is gentle truth disclosure, revealing reality in a way that's calm, factual, and hard to dispute. This begins with choosing the right moment. INFJs wait until emotions are low and the manipulator is more likely to listen, or until they have clear, undeniable evidence. Then they present the truth simply and without unnecessary commentary. For example, instead of saying, "You're lying about what happened," they might say, "Here's what I remember, and here's what was documented." This shifts the focus from accusation to fact, making it harder for the manipulator to twist the narrative. The gentle part of this tactic is crucial. INFJs avoid loaded language, insults, or dramatic gestures. They let the truth speak for itself. This not only protects their own credibility, but also makes it easier for others to see the manipulator's behavior clearly. Another strength of this method is that it creates an internal conflict for the manipulator. If they push back too aggressively, they risk exposing themselves further. If they stay quiet, they lose control of the narrative. Either way, the balance of power shifts toward the INFJ. Over time, gentle truth disclosure can dismantle a manipulator's influence. Each fact revealed chips away at the false reality they've built. And because the INFJ delivers it without aggression, they remain above reproach, even in the eyes of others watching the situation unfold. This tactic works because it combines honesty with restraint. The INFJ doesn't need to win through volume or force. They win by making the truth undeniable. Tactic number 6, quiet realignment of power. Perhaps the most decisive way an INFJ dismantles a manipulator is through quiet realignment of power. Unlike loud confrontations or open challenges, this tactic is subtle and gradual. The manipulator rarely sees it happening until the balance has shifted entirely. This begins with the INFJ reclaiming their own sense of control. Once they've identified manipulation and protected their vulnerabilities, they stop operating from a defensive position and begin to influence the dynamic themselves. This doesn't mean they try to control the other person. It means they redefine the terms of the interaction. One way they do this is by becoming less emotionally available to the manipulator while investing more in supportive, trustworthy connections. This reduces the manipulator's influence and increases the INFJ's sense of strength. In group settings, this can also shift the social balance, as others begin to gravitate toward the INFJ's steadiness instead of the manipulator's drama. Another part of this tactic is controlling the flow of information. The INFJ may start providing only selective details to the manipulator, while openly sharing with people who are supportive and aligned with their values. This isolates the manipulator's access without any open declaration of hostility. Quiet realignment of power also involves changing responses. Where the manipulator once received emotional reactions, now they are met with calm, measured replies. Where they once controlled conversations, now the INFJ guides topics toward neutral or positive ground. Over time, this changes the manipulator's ability to steer the interaction. The real strength of this tactic is that it's sustainable. The INFJ doesn't have to constantly watch for attacks. They've shifted the structure of the relationship so that manipulation has fewer entry points. The manipulator is left in a position where their usual tactics no longer work, and they either have to change their approach or lose interest entirely. By the time this shift is complete, the INFJ has quietly taken back their personal space, their emotional freedom, and their influence in the relationship or group. And they've done it without escalating conflict or sacrificing their own values. This final tactic works because it's not about defeating someone in one dramatic move. It's about creating lasting change that leaves the INFJ stronger and the manipulator powerless. INFJs dismantle manipulation not with force, but with awareness, patience, and strategy. Their intuition detects the problem, their boundaries protect them, and their calm truth-telling reshapes the dynamic. When all these tactics combine, they create a quiet but unshakable defense, one that leaves manipulators with no foothold and restores balance without destroying the INFJ's peace. The INFJ's strength against manipulators lies in subtlety. They don't need to shout to win. They use insight, boundaries, and calm action to take control. Over time, these tactics dismantle manipulation completely. If you're an INFJ, trust these instincts. If you know one, understand this: their quiet strength isn't just personality, it's a powerful form of protection.